Well, we'll talk with a few members of the orchestra this evening, and we'll begin with one of the players in the second violin group of the Lake Washington Symphony Orchestra that we just heard from. Neil Bacon is with us. Neil, how long have you been playing in the orchestra?
Well, you know, Dave, I started with the orchestra back when it was the Bellevue Philharmonic, and this would have been early 2000s, around about 2003, just long enough ago that I can forget when it was. And since then it's transformed into the Lake Washington Symphony, and it's just a great pleasure to play with all these wonderful players.
Now, maybe you know this already, but this was not the instrument that I just saw you play in our
Right, yeah, well, I like to come prepared to these interviews, and I just thought this might come up, so I figured this was actually the instrument that I started on. So although you just heard us play the violin quartet, I started at an early age on the banjo. My father taught me banjo because he went to visit some of the old timers back in Virginia, I believe it was. Yeah. And he learned what they call the claw hammer style. And so it's actually a good instrument to start with because you start with rhythm, the way that you're plucking it, if I can just demonstrate a little bit. So there's a style of playing that they call claw hammer, and the basic method is. So any music teacher knows that when you're teaching rhythm, you teach 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and so that comes for free with this. And then if you want to do the 1 eanders and the 2 eanders, getting more notes in the. I'm a little rusty, and I only know a few tunes, but basically, you know, the claw hammer style is you're striking down, and sometimes you'll hit the sheepskin as well. So it's a little different from playing the violin.
I've been to the Grand Ole Opry 2 times in my life, Neil, so I'm feeling very nostalgic here. How did you transition from the banjo to the violin? So
when I was young, I heard there were people around my dad and others, you know, who were playing fiddle, and I always liked the sound of the fiddle, and then a little later on, you know, I heard people in my uncle's orchestra in England playing what they call violin, basically classical violin, and I gradually realized, that's the same instrument, and I like both kinds of music, so maybe I should have a go at it. And I was also fascinated, if I'll just put this down, is my absence, I was also fascinated by the fact that, while the banjo has frets, the violin doesn't have any frets, and I was wondering, how do they do that? How do they know where to put the fingers? And so that was sort of a fascinating challenge for me, so that was sort of the initial impetus for why I chose that instrument.
So you have a different job other than music during the day. What do you do?
So during the day, I am a physicist. So, the reason I originally came to the Puget Sound area was to do my PhD in physics at the University of Washington. And I was lucky enough to be able to study with Stephen Starrick, who was the violin prof there at the time. And
So, physicist by day, banjo player by night.
Banjo player.
How does it all? Do you have a lot of time for the banjo still?
I have a lot of time for it, but to be honest, it doesn't come out of the case all that often because I really just know a few tunes. But I love the sound it makes, and it's so easy just to get a good sound. A little different from this instrument where you sort of have to work at it.
So it's a little scary without the frets sometimes.
It's scary without the frets. On the other hand, it opens up possibilities that you can slide around. And you can actually adjust your intonation a little bit in ways that you can't do on a fretted instrument, at least not as easily. And also it comes with, it's not just one instrument, it's 2. Right? There are endless possibilities with the violin and with the bow, and just, you know, the way it contacts the string, the way it can bounce on the string, you know, the distance that you play from the bridge makes a big difference in the sound. So there's just a lot of, I believe there's a lot of personality you can get into a violin.
You just don't whack it and thump it quite as much as you do with the banjo.
Maybe not. I mean, there's music, there's a Rossini piece where you do that. It's the fellow knocking at the door. Yeah. Sometimes you do that, but it's not quite as robust as the banjo.
Well, it's great to hear you play the violin and the banjo, Neil. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
Well, we just enjoyed some great Liszt and Beethoven and Brahms. Exquisite to hear Mark Salman play again. Mark, welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Of course, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, we're not only celebrating the holidays, ho ho ho, but a great birth anniversary this month, 250th anniversary of the birth of Beethoven. When did your Beethoven journey begin? How old were you? Do you remember the first piece?
I'm quite sure it was when I was 8 or so, and I learned Furley's. And I was very excited to play that, and I played it every opportunity for every person who would sit down and listen to it. I was so excited by it.
Yeah. And how is Beethoven, or how have you grown with Beethoven, or come to appreciate him in an even deeper way as the years have gone on?
Well, certainly Beethoven is the composer that I've probably spent the most time with over the years, and has spoken the most constantly with me at every moment in my life. Again, since that first Furley's, I mean, I loved every sonata and every little bit, every movement, every piece by Beethoven I ever got to play. And, sort of culminated, I don't know, in I think 1991 or 92, I did the entire Beethoven cycle in New York. And then a few years later, I did it out here and on King FM too. Mm-hmm. And then pretty much rarely a concert goes by that I don't have Beethoven. What I should mention with Orchestra Seattle and George Shangro, I did the cycle of all the concerti and the choral fantasy, and if late at night, if I'm thinking of something I want to play for myself, or I want to see like, how's this piece, has it evolved? How do I see it today? Can I find something more in it? I always turn to some Beethoven sonata, and there's so many that your views of them grow and change and deepen over the years, and and frankly, it's like the better I know them, the more I practice them, the more fun I have playing them.
Give us a little snapshot of the one we heard tonight. Fairly late.
It's a middle period
piece.
This is the one that's sandwiched in between the famous Waldstein and Appassionata sonatas, these sort of barnstorming, heaven-storming things. In the middle, he writes this really unusual sonata, and I sort of picked it for one of those things that's sort of like, well, everyone knows Beethoven writes these big epic things, but no one knows he writes these really unusual, experimental, and very, very humorous pieces. That was just as an important part of his music as the giant epic Appassionata kind of pieces. Mm-hmm. And so this sonata, starts out with this kind of a minuet, almost a look back at the 18th century, the dances and courtly dances he grew up with. And then in this sort of the contrasting trio section, he takes something that's totally the opposite, that's virtuosic and almost rough-edged, full of all these sort of funny accents, and almost the greatest opposite thing he could kind of put into that. It's almost like he was like looking back to the 18th century and poking a little bit of fun at it, in a very fond way, because the minuet itself has this wonderful feeling of nostalgia, like he's looking back at his youth, but then looking forward at the same time and saying, what else can you do with the minuet? And then that movement, it's kind of, he keeps this sort of almost staid kind of phrasing of the minuet. It's very regular. It keeps coming back in sort of these stops at the time. The very end of it has got this wonderful, much more romantic kind of feeling. It ends with this chord that's, it's a chord that could be out of Liszt or Tchaikovsky almost, And then that sets the stage for the second movement, which is totally different, this incredibly virtuosic, perpetual motion that he almost seems to be challenging himself to, how many keys can I modulate through in 3 minutes in this piece? And it has every weird theoretical modulation you can think of, this wonderful sort of chromaticism. Almost like, okay, there was the past and here's the future, all in 10 minutes of a sonata.
What's it like to encounter Beethoven or revisit Beethoven in pandemic times? Because I think of how he struggled personally, how he, when Vienna was under siege, how he, endured that with the other citizens. I mean, it was a very hard life, and I just wonder if his music in this time resonates differently with you.
I'll have to kind of think about that, only because he's always so constantly with me. But certainly, Beethoven, his life, he had so many things going on in his life. I mean, not only with the deafness, but constant illnesses. If you read about it, how many times was he in bed for 3 months or whatever, and worried about he's got to get out of bed so he could write some music and make a living. Basically, he just lived what he had to deal with, the day-to-day life would have defeated all the rest of us, and let alone that he accomplished all of this sort of stuff. And also that the music isn't this woe is me music, it's this incredibly generous sort of restorative music for everyone who listens to it. I mean, there's such a loving sort of center to the music. And certainly that's something that we can use in pandemic times. And certainly in his music, he puts like in a whole life's experience in one sonata. Once you get to those late sonatas, like the 110 and whatever, it's sort of like, yeah, that's like, I don't know, 30 years of life you go through in 23 minutes.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
And so you don't have to worry about what you're missing out in real life if you like live these Beethoven sonatas.
Well, and thank you. After the little snowstorms of the list and the stormy Beethoven, thank you for sending us out in such a transcendent way with that gorgeous Brahms. That was just beautiful.
Well, thank you. Well, I'll mention a funny story, and it's Christmas related. As I was trying to think of something seasonal with all this about the Brahms. Is a story that comes from Brahms right at the end of his life, when he was exactly the time when he's writing these pieces. And Brahms was the lifelong bachelor and never had children and didn't have a family and was actually kind of clueless when he was around people, really. This person, really very, very tender-hearted, but like never knew when to joke and when not to and whatever. But he would spend his Christmas with his landlord's family. And they had young children. And one day, just as a joke, just before Christmas, he went to the children and told them, like, "Oh, children, I have really bad news for you. I hear that Santa Claus is ill this year, and he's not going to bring any presents to you." And he thought this was really funny. And the kids, like, started bawling. It's dissolved, and he was like, what do I do? What do I do? And he ran to a panic to the to his landlord's wife and asked her, "Oh, can you please stop them? Please stop them. I don't know what to do." And you think of this dignified, great composer, but he was clueless with kids.
Oh, absolutely.
It's funny.
Yeah. Well, put one of these hats on Brahms and you take the edge off there.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Salmon, thank you so much for your playing always and for a great conversation.
Okay, well, thank you, Dave.
Eli Weinberger is one of the cellists in our quartet this evening, and it was so great to hear you play. Being a cellist myself, just did my heart so much good. Really well.
So glad.
I love the Bleak Midwinter arrangement, especially. That seems particularly well suited for the voice of the cello.
Uh-huh. I think cello quartet might be one of the tougher groups to arrange for, because everybody is playing in this sort of low, what we would call middle tone sort of register.
Right.
That's a tough register to hear presence and balance in. And I think the arranger did a very nice job finding ways to generate separation, even with that sort of homogeneous texture.
Yeah, well, the performers did too, so good
That's
on
kind
you. How did the cello come into your hands?
Well, the cello came into my hands because I asked.
Oh, yeah?
So when I was in preschool, we had a show and tell, and in the show and tell, I can distinctly remember one of the other students bringing in this shiny red cello. And I saw that and I went, I want that, right? For no other reason than it was shiny and I was 4. That being said, my parents were smarter than to capitulate on the first ask, and they made me continue asking. And by the time I turned 5, apparently I had not given up the ask, so they got me one. And the rest is history. I have since fallen in love actually with other things than just the fact that it's shiny, but that's still great.
Why do you think it was such a good match for you, or has become a good match other than the shiny part? But how are you so suited to the cello?
I think the cello and I work well together because the cello is a really expressive instrument, being close to the human vocal range, and I wear my heart on my sleeve. So for me, cello is well suited.
I had occasion on the radio over the years to interview Lynn Harrell. We lost him this year, and he said something that I thought was sort of funny at the time, but he said it very sincerely. He said, why do cellists like to hang out and play together? And they just seem like a very collegial bunch. And he goes, we embrace the cello as players. We hug our instruments, and thus do we with one another. Do you find that cellists hang together?
I do. I think that's a brilliant metaphor. And I will also say it was actually Lynn Harrell who was one of the few performers who I was able to see at Benaroya Hall right after it opened when I was young, who inspired me to continue with the cello. Right. So there's an interesting connection there as well.
Yeah. Do you have holiday memories, traditions around the cello or music making that stand out for you?
Absolutely. When I was young, my family was close friends with another family where everyone played an instrument. Everyone played an instrument. So at the holidays, we would get together to have a potluck-style party, and we would sight read humongous chunks of the Bach-Brandenburg concertos with crazy arrangements. Recorders, synthesizers, whatever we could make noise with was included. I think even one year there was a foot pedal organ playing some of the continuo line.
That's wild.
Yeah,
That's so
but
great.
I have very fond memories from those parties.
How has it been for you as a musician during the pandemic? As hard as it's been, I think in some ways I feel just sitting here listening to you folks tonight and be able to come and socially distance and mask and listen to live music is so special to me. And I just want, what are some of your reflections about how your relationship to music has maybe changed during this time?
Sure, I think that's a really interesting point, and we've all had to come up with coping strategies, both from a sort of mental health standpoint, but also from a professional standpoint. And from a professional standpoint, I've focused on recording and on teaching my students. I teach them online right now. But when we get a chance to come together and play like this, right, in person again, it's like brings back this emotion you almost forgot about, this connectivity, right, that thing that brings us all together around music. And it's so special that I know when we come out of the pandemic, all the opportunities to play together will be met with a whole new level of appreciation and gratitude, I think, both from performers, but also from audiences, because they're going to see and feel that person-to-person connection that we've all been missing so much.
Eli, it's wonderful to hear you play. Thank you for leading the quartet here and for talking with us.
Dave, my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We've just heard Angela Wong play so beautifully for us. Angela, thank you so much for that. What is the instrument that you're holding there?
This is called pipa. You can pronounce like a P-I-P-A. And this instrument is the history of over 2,000 years. So in China, it's original is not from China. Original is from Persia. So they have the same kind of instrument, but now we developed by the Chinese musician for so many thousands of years. So I would say at the beginning, it's not like this kind, but the shape is kind of similar, but it's not that much flex, but now we have a lot. So so now it become people, if talking about people, they always think it's from China, actually it's not.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
When I'm a cello player, and sometimes there's technique on the right hand and technique on the left hand, and is anyone more difficult or more challenging because so much is going on with both of your hands?
Yeah, I would say in Chinese instrument, I would say pipa is one of the most hardest instrument to play because we need we need 10 fingers.
Yes.
So 5 fingers here, and then 5, actually sometimes 5 fingers from here too. So, and also the cooperation, it's really hard. So when people say oh, Angela, I want to learn pipa from you, I said, you have to work very hard, just like when I was little. When I learned pipa, when I was 7 or 8 years old, I spent a lot of time. I don't have my beautiful childhood. I just stays at home playing, and looking down, from my window. I look down to the kids, all my classmates playing. I just play my pipa. I was like, oh, I wish I could go out play with them.
I bet a few of them wish they could play the pipa as well as you.
Yeah, a lot of them, they want to. I say, wow, you have to spend a lot of time for that.
There was so many interesting sounds. Some of the things I heard were almost like percussion. I felt like I was hearing bells ringing. Can you tell me about some of the more interesting effects on the instrument?
This one can make a lot of sound different. One of my teacher, he's very famous in China, and he developed this instrument to be like a Western guitar sound. You can make that like that. And also makes like the Japanese, that 3-string, dun, dun, that kind of deep sound, we call sanxian. and it can really kind of copy a lot of different kind of instruments.
Yeah.
So you say percussion, yes, we have that kind, and also we also can make some kind of like a fighting sound, like in the old time, the horsey sound. So I didn't play in here, but it's like a lot of like in people's, I would say in people's songs have a lot of like fighting songs too. So
interesting.
yeah, I can really copy a lot.
The two pieces that you played sounded so different. Was one much older than the other, or what were the backgrounds of those pieces?
Actually, the first piece is kind of like a holiday one. It's like a flying dragon. So you know, in China, so there's a holiday, like they like to do this like a dragon dancing. This piece is about that. And the second one is not original from China. It's from some kind of Middle East country. So, but you know, we call that is like a hometown sun. It's also like a feeling like people really happy about their hometown, that kind of stuff.
I see.
Yeah.
These instruments, the oud or the guitar or the lute, they just absorb so many different cultures and styles and influences. Is that one of your attractions to the instrument?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because mainly it's Chinese song, a lot of them. But and also like when I come to U.S. and also I like to do some kind of even like playing the jazz with the people and just play for fun.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for playing for us. It's beautiful. And,
thank you.
Happy holidays to you.
Yeah, you too. Okay.